Zeev Kaplan and Moshe Wisniewski. Yeah.
Does what you mean have a shot? 2 days ago.
That's a good question.
Maybe we should make it.
Maybe we should have a full
That's an official shot.
Yeah. But Hashem the Chassan is going to be on Yudah of Nissen. Moshe Wisniewski and Zeev Kaplan are making the Chassan on Yudah of Nissen.
That's guts.
Yeah. So Baruch Hashem is becoming a spreading. The idea is being raised that we should have another Tmim Shat. Yeah, good. Okay. Everything working? Okay.
Just announce the page and the date.
So we came to the Aveda. Oh, this is what's today?
Ayin Beis.
Yud Gimel. Yeah, today's Yud Gimel Oda Aleph. Hemshech Tofesh Ayin Beis. Chelik Aleph. Dibur Maskil B'Yom Hashmini Atzeres. Ahmed Tov Lamed. Leading on to Tov Lamed Aleph. So we saw the difference between the Korbanos and what they represent in Avodas Hashem compared to the Inyan Ketores. And we saw that the Korbanos in Yonam was Nasa al Mizbeach al Chitoni Be'er Oil Moed in the Azora. And we saw that the Inyan of Chitoni Salev was the Ava, which Alaf the miles in these banners, when I get to that Ava, it's Sof an Ava Mishashev is Bekli. And it was connected with the union of Beklalos Liyavos Hashem Alakecha Ki Hucha Chayecha, and that was Toitzah from his bonus in Mechalkel Chayim Bechesed, with all beauty we had in Mechalkel Chayim Bechesed, the union from Kli B'Toy Kli, but the Amshachar the Oya Dafke Lefi Erech Hanivim B'Chol Echad V'Echad B'Frat. That's the union from Amitius V'Ike. HaNivro is Chayes Erekisha Boy B'Chol Shari Advarim Tfeilim Dafke Alidei is Bonanas Kazu. There's the union of Ava V'Dveikis in Elikus. We saw that it's the union of Dveikis Mitzad Chitzenius Alev, and therefore its union is Davke Manucha V'Shashvas Be'anefesh. But we saw that the union from Pnimis Alev connected with the Mizbeach HaPnimi, but that was union Akteres. And we brought down the Pirush of the word Keteres, and we spoke about that. We mentioned that at some length, that's an Aramic word. The Sherish of the word Keteres is a root in the Sofa Aramis, but that's a union from Keter or Ketar, meaning Kesher. And so the Keteres was the union of the Kashrus, of the Etzem HaNefesh, the Be'erein Sefer, the Atzmiyah, so the Neshama, which is Makusha Balavachi, Tmidi Beif and Tmidi and Be'erein Sefer. And we brought down the Lashon of the Rashbi, it's brought down right at the end of the Zoya, in the Idruzutra, right near the Bisman HaIstalkis. So Rashbi, that he said about himself, B'chad Katira is Katana, Bei Achido and Be'le, Lahita, that we sort of had Katira with a Kesher Echad, that's Mavur, Be'habi Mekemes, that's even Yechida, and even Lamaila Miyachida, that's the discussions of the Etzem HaNefesh in Elakus mitzad the Tmidias and the Amitias are Iskashras of the Neshama B'Lavochi B'Shorsha B'Elakus. Like got full house tonight. B'Lavochi in Elakus. And like it's Mavui in the Hemshech Samavov in Parsha Lech Lecha, not far from the beginning of the Hemshech, what the Rebbe, even though it's not the Ika Inin of that Hemshech, but it's HaPerek, and nonetheless he gets under that whole statement of the Rashbi, and he talks about that Iskashras of the Rashbi in Elakus. Bechad Katira is Katana, and he talks also about the two inyanim from Bei Achida or Bei Lahita, or Bei Achida. Those are these Kashas Atzmis of the Neshama in Elakus, and therefore this is an Ava which is mitzad the Etzem, not mitzad the Koiches Dimim, as we'll soon see in a minute. And the inyan from Bei Lahita, that's the inyan from Eish, the inyan the Eish Amitia, the Neshama has Eilev Niklal and loses its whole Metzias in Elakus, like he's Mavayim Perek Yoter. The Neshama Teva, Mitzad Etzem Teva, is Eilev Nidbak, V'Shor Shalamayla. That's the two inyanim of Bei Achida, and that was a Madregik Tamidias of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. That was Inyane Boifen Tamidi. Was Kashrus Shalamayla Mia Seichel. So that's already a Inyan Ein Arech Legabi what we saw the Mizbeach HaChitzon. We saw the Mizbeach HaChitzon was Davki Anava, which is Mishyashiv in the Kelim, and it comes Davki Mitzad his Boninus, and we saw Davki Mitzad the Inyan from Hasoger, the other is Misbeinen in Shorsha and Elin Yoter. But those are all inyanim that can be nikofim and nitfasim tzichloi. And alidezeh is mamshich hachayis elakus and hachayis in elakus betoich koiches apnimim until he's miseira bedveikes ve'av elakus or betoren and even how he understands and he's masi elakus and mamela this is mishashiv betoich hakli. This Ava, that's in a even from Chad Ketira, Bei Achido, Bei Lahito, those are mitzad the Etzem is Kashras, and the Etzem Abitel, B'Metzias of the Shurish, and Shoma in Elakus. So, and therefore it's a Inim from Lamaila Lagamri Mea Seichel. So ask yourself the Shaila, how do you get to such an Ava? If it's Lagamri Lamaila Mea Seichel, what do you do all of a sudden? Just give a sprung or a wave or something, and all of a sudden you just leave behind all the seichel and all the koiches hanefesh, and you just up in a inim from a eish lahita nishraf gamri in elakus, beliko metzias klal or klal liachme. How do you get there? How do you start? So we see that it's a very interesting formula. We say that it's avazu. The arousal begolui of that arva he gam kain alideis boninus. It begins in his boninus. But we'll see that here's a fascinating thing like we described last year. These boninus is already looking bifnim mitoich his boninus. It's only his boninus in order to lead you to Lamaila Mea Seichel. He is a dimension just can't jump into Lamaila Mea Seichel. He can't even be margish. Koshkein Masik, what are the Inyonim Shalom Alam Yaseichel, Ele Im Kain, he's mashit himself from Inyoni Seichel. Avokadei, to be mashit himself from Inyoni Seichel, he has to begin upon him in a certain gather of Seichel, which will lead him to Alamailo Mea Seichel. In other words, as our Seichel, which will talk to him, but even Kozer, that he will be mashit to such Mina Seichel. If you don't have a Sefer, they ain't called time to be in Halimot. We don't have an Ayin Beis up there anymore?
We've taken them all. They won't be used.
I think we used to have one up there.
No, they've all been used.
They've all been used.
We got it.
because if you don't see oasis, it's big to see schwimmen. You know what schwimmen is? To swim deep waters. Is a mele is the Rebbe the arousal of this however is also through his bonus, but כשמזבנן שכל בחינס האויר והחיה שבאילמס וכן כלולוס ההשתלשלות איך שכל זה הוא רק האורר לבד שבאין הרייך לגבי עצמס. העצמס אין סייף מופלא ומובדל מהאילמס. So we see it's like another what you might call traffic light. It's like another direction altogether. In the previous is Boninus, Mitzad Chitonias, Halev, taking all the inyonim and bringing them into the Kli through a inyan of Ava and his bonus, which is shy to the inyan Oilamas and to the church of his whole his harvest, and a higher oilam. And how all the inyanim lead him to a yoiker and a gishmak in the fact that the Eivish is machaya all the oilam. I said, Merle, Avos Hashem Alekecha ki yucha chayecha davki akoch in the elikus hanimshich el adam. But machaya is a be'eza oifen, like we saw, be'eza oifen hu achayas is there's a chilik between a bria and between yitzira, between asiya, and that causes him a chayas nifla in the chayas eloki. He has a chayas in chayas. A chayas in the chayas. Oh, but the whole meaning of this is Bonan is only like we saw last week. To lead him upwards, he should go beyond the whole meaning of his Bonanis and the whole meaning of Anasogas Aseichel. Because he's misbraining how all those inyanim which brought him Mitzad Chitonias Alev to such a koch, to such a Yisraelis, all those inyanim are only just ha'oras ba'alma ve'en kol erech klal legabi amitis Ayin Beis legabi atzmus oyer Ayin Beis v'afil inyan von oyer koshkein legabi atzmus and Mamela he sees how all these inyanim being manit via ha'ora buvad is legabi atzmus ein lem kol erech klal and the mamish ein arech legabi Shorshem ba'atzmus Ayin Beis that he's mufla umuvdal min oilamas. What mufla means as one known relatively separate. Al Chapon there's some possibility still to grasp the inyan and muvdal means separately. Legamri like it's well known. But you get to Nazil as a Portoloshan in the Torah. Ish ki yafli neder lahozir nozil Hashem ki yafli. We see that's in from Pele that he elevates himself from Shah b'nei Adam al yedei what he's misnazem and a yayin and a geffen v'chulu. Amamera, Al Chaponin has a certain erech between him and Shah b'nei Adam, even though he's mufla. But that's in a Pele. But the inyan from muvdal is even lamayla miseh, inyan from avdola muchletes. The efes kotseyu yuchol liyes gamkein soge bo'ofen ha'afloa de Ayin Beis. He said, however, there can be a quickie. Ve'efes kotzehu yuchol liyes gamkein soge bo'ofen ha'afloa de Ayin Beis alidei yediyas v'asogas ashlilo. Since we said that there's also a lead-in from this bonus to mufla, it's shayach a certain asoga also in that inyan. And we see that everywhere where we can, we try to build on the inyan from asoga at the beginning. And that's the big cloud in Chassidus, that anything which is built on what you might call spiritual skuladike zachen, not what you might call v'derech kvitzes v'kunzim v'chude, ein lehem kiyum amiti. There has to be first of all the usage of the inyan of seichel, because seichel can work in two directions also. Seichel is a inyan pnimi etzol adam, v'adarab it's inyan pnimi v'atzmi etzol. So we see that Seichel can bring everything down into our Bosha, and it can be Masbin on him, Lefi Erech HaAdam, and Lefi Oifen HaAdam, but the Inyan from Seichel can also be mafli itself, and it can go upwards, and as I'm in Oifen, that it's mafshit itself from all Inyan slapshas. Particularly the Koyach HaChachma, V'chulu, it's well known, the Koyach HaFlo, and the Koyach HaShoter, that there is in the Inyan from Chachma. So that's what we're talking in the first Chitzenius Alev, or that's in from Moichin Ashayachim El Alev. But remember, that's how Moichin are moving what you might call downwards. It's how the whole Amshocha and the whole Keder is in from Gilev Amshocha Lefi Koiches HaAdam. Ve'ila, this Inyan, that's in from Aliyah Ve'afshotas HaSeichel. As far as the Rebbe, it's possible, even this is a common thing in the works of the Rebbe, and Etter he talks about it in the beginning of the Hemshech Barichas, that it's possible for there to be a certain asoge even in the oifen afla, in the way that Oyer Seif is mufla from the elements. In other words, that you can gain some picture of just how muvdal that Oyeri or mufla, just how mufla that Oyer is from the whole makir of Seder HaIshtal. So kemuven, or that's somebody that is Eisik binyonim eile betoikiv b'ribui pratias, but Masira Nasina Linyoni Meilu, as he's able to have a soga fill in the oifan of the afloa. And how is that? Al Yedei Yediyas Vasogas Ashlila. That's what he's Bible there, and there are two forms of asoga. Asoga Sachiyu is where you talk about a thing that you can define it, and you know what it's in Yonimah, and you can bring it into the gather of the asoga Sabina, and it can be malbishet, as you might say, B'Sharei HaKoefim. That's Inyan V'Asogas Achiyu. You can talk about Inyan Kamoishavu, and the Seichel is Teifus, der Inyan Lefi Inyan, how Seichel is an Emes HaKoeh Pnimi. Over the Inyan V'Asogas Achlila, what Seichel says, that all can tell you is what this thing is not. In other words, it can just keep going higher and reaching a higher form of asoga, and then instead of bringing that down into a whole posture, it takes you up the other way and says, oh yes, well, that's not the street. It's like you get a big long Ezra from somebody, you're trying to find your way, and then he gives you a whole long arichas of the famous joke, you know. And they say, oh yeah, but by the way, that's not the street. That's not it. It's a lozer b'klau. In other words, that you gain a tremendous appreciation of a certain inyan, and then the seichel itself that taught you all that then is shoef klapi maila, yes, even the yud, yes, even the kreitzer shel yud, shoef klapi maila, and it says, oh yeah, but it's not that cloud. All that we spoke about, that's only the beginning of the Emes HaHemshech is as a lozer. It's not that at all. That's the from Asogas Ashlila. So Asogas Ashlila, just by even call is a lozer because it's a Ayin Seif is a muf. Or we can say that there's been so much proti avona in the inyanim what it is shad to be masi, that then he can say, but maybe it's not that inyan, and it's muflim inyan zeh, muflim inyan zeh, for oid muflim inyan zeh, till alidei proti isaskes in this inyan for nasogas ashlila, he can come to a certain appreciation just how much, or just the way in which even the Ein Seif is mufla mi shur shashtaus. I can move, and that's only in the Inyan from mufla, and not in muvdal, we said before. Like Amri Abo Chaponim in the meaning from how it's mufla. The Inyan from Seivei kol almin lamashal. That's my word. That is Inyan from Seivei, which Al Chaponim is makiv alo ilam. You can come to a certain appreciation just how much that's makiv and what sort of uifan. But he's a derech zemudal. That's the Inyan and Asogas Ashlila, where you talk about what the Inyan is not what you talk about what it is or could be, but you talk about what it's not, B'yemet. That's called Asogas Ashlila, and therefore you have a certain appreciation in the Oifen of the Afla. There's a lot about that from the Rabbi in Eter and in Samachas and Shari Makim. There's a lot of different, in Samavovish got about it, in the middle of the Hemshech, is whenever Yesh B'Seh Harei incidents, and here he just mentions that Kilo B'Derech Siko, that's Inyan from Asogas Ashlila. Shali Dei Seh, when that happens, He said, once your mind, your koiches pnimiyim, that's the only way to emes pnimius in a mensch. Your koiches pnimiyim pull you in the other way. The traffic light is working even acher. Instead of them bringing everything down into you, they say to you, give a cook how it's completely not you, and completely not what we think, and not what we can even have any form of a sogas achiyu, b'zeh klal. All we can just know, the form, even in the ideal sense, the form of the afloa. So then a mensch gets a inyan of going out of himself and upwards and out of himself legamri. In other words, his whole koya pnimi teaches to go up. That's the Maila that it starts off with Seichel, because it starts off with the feet on the ground, but then they take him completely, but if he just started off without the infant Seichel, he doesn't have any ground for the whole thing. It's just like they call the old saying, as it a tansel mitagatl. That's like, that's a little, what called, they used to say once upon a time that, the Polish, don't angezogen, we don't mean anything. The Polish Chassidim gehen a viel als Pochen mit Gartel, so der Tanzl mit der Gartel, a junge Tanz mit der junge Gartel. In other words, that's Stamm in the world. Immer mehr. But that's the whole Indian. If you start off without Seichel, without any real knowledge, you say, oh yes, I'm Lamaila Mi'aseichel. Ain't ko efshori is bezeh. In other words, you can only be Lamaila Mi'aseichel if you did everything you could with Seichel. And then Seichel itself has been blessed by the Eivishter, that itself elevates you and takes you michutzla gidrei Seichel. Then the whole thing's got a basis, and it's mitzad the pnimius order. In other words, he is involved in that with all that he's got. He's not just dancing around. Edify said the Rebbe, he be'emes has a rotzer kolo ba'atzmas that he wants be'emes to go out. Be a rotzer, going out and upwards, but it's a emes, a rotzer, because it's been worked out. How to use the expression, he's got it all worked out. It's a rotzer amiti based on a knowledge and a picture in his mind, kamash efsha, of the floor of the Ayin Beis, and can move on. That leads him even further and further in Dakis Ayinyan. Therefore, he's in Azamin even that he's got this rotzai to be niklal in, to lose his matzias altogether. He kolel means that he wants to go into atzmas, not that he wants to bring out a kus into his cave. He wants to lose himself, like he brings over there. Pregitesa, the emes the neshama is dobi b'sher shemeker afal pisha the tafsir lo tishoyer miyuma mitziusa harisha. Nothing will remain from the first matzia. I mean, we mean here an emes madrege, similar to what the Alter Rebbe said, that he doesn't want Gan Eden attacked and he's Gan Eden alien. Take him, he's going to deal with Gan Eden attacked and Gan Eden alien. But that's what the Indian of Mili B'Shamayim. I don't have, who do I have in the heavens? In the high realm is Imcho. I feel that those things which are mamish tofa v'potel eilecho imcho leichof hatzti ba'oret. That I down here in this world don't have any chayfetz for those in Yonim, even though I should. If I'm ba'oret, then I should have a chayfetz for those in Yonim. And he said, no, I don't have a chayfetz because I want only the Amitius Atzmas himself. And that's it's a taka on dem pasik that over there in Derech Mitzvah Secha in Korev Lasof Mitzvah Shos Mitzvah Tfilah. The Rebbe Demotzeli brings down the story about how the Alter Rebbe used to say, "Ich will nicht ein Garein, nicht ein Olam Haba, ich will nicht das Dich allein." And it's a state in the Sipur, in the Drush of Shos Mitzvah Tfilah. We're not in Midnight, Korev Lasefer. The Rebbe Rasham brings it in another place. Avizul benusach acher, story that he brings that the Alter Rebbe used to roll around sometimes when he used to bake it, so he used to roll on the floor. He raved Dveikusa, but once I heard him raved Dveikusa, he's Gaugele or he said like, well, this man, that's Dichalei, and it's a little bit different. The story is a little sort of boy, boy van Acher, aber the movement is dezelfde. So therefore he says, yeah, the Shamayim v'oret ain't Gan Eden and Gan Eden atarte, and that's what the Alter Rebbe said. He will nicht ein Gan Eden. So I mean, Gan Eden can have different possibilities. It can be Gan Eden atarte, and it can be Gan Eden Elyon. V'kasher is boine. Yeah, eich sha'giluyim. The Gan Eden ain't gam kein racha orale vod. That the Giluyim in Gan Eden are also only ha'ora. What does he mean, gam kein? What does it touch gam kein? What's it the Kiddush? It's well known that Gan Eden is l'mayla mi'olam is biyah. Gan Eden is a Gilu from Atzilus in biyah. It's a ha'ora, a chopanim from Atzilus in biyah. Kiyadua. That's in from Bina, Atzilus, that's Meir Ali Malchus, Atzilus into Gan Eden, into Olam Abriya, Gan Eden Elyon, al chopanim. And therefore, he said that whole Indian from Gan Eden, it's also order. The biyud nivra Olam Habo. In other words, the new teaching Olam Habo is referring to Gan Eden. What Loi told me, we say that, in many Jewish systems we do teach the word Olam Habo, meaning that which comes after the life in this world, is referring to the even Gan Eden. Mamela, he said, Shamayim v'oretz is both madrigas. He said there also are ha'ora. Why? Because the biyud nivra Olam Habo, the whole Olam Habo is meant via nakuda be alma. It's also gabi amitis atzmas. It's one nakuda. It's one yudele. Like gabi the ganze even the atzmas. Mamela, that follows. Yeah, v'zeo v'im chaloicha chofatzti. Was it a touch im chaloicha chofatzti? Gam b'chinas ki im cho mekeir chayim. Even that which is described by the pasuk itself as being im cho. Yeah, in other words, with you. And what is that? Mekeir chayim. Hu b'chinas moker achayim or moker tanugim amusogim. That's a very interesting lesson. That's moker tanugim which are musogim. In other words, that the tanugim which are not musogim, they're tanugim mitzad atzmas. Kavur barichas in some of all ganze arichas of the tainig atzmi aposhet, the tainig atzmi aposhet amulgash, the tainig atzmi abilti mulgash, the ganze arichas. But those all minyanim von tanugim which are built musogim, they're not mitzadini von musogim. And they're shayt afkit Olam Habo amiti take miyad mamish and zeicha sein. Er zijn in die van Olam Habo amiti. Mamela dort is tanugim bilti musogim. Aber die Nonne von Gan Eden, Tanugim, und der Ribui Tanugim, ja, je Halleluja Sela. Es geht doch auf das Neshamas Arayam in Gan Eden, Bilti Sof, aber auf und bekend, das ist Bilti Sof, und das auch even, that Sof ko Sof, yesh bezah Soge, different levels in Asoga, Adein Sof. So there we said, that's all Tanugim Amusogim. The Queen's Asoga, one is, ja, a Chochma we Gan Eden, a Tachte we Gan Eden, Elyon, albeit it's een van de Sogas a Chochma, it's een van Bittel in Elikus, of Sokos of it's a Soga. Ze ko ze, hu imcha v'tofele, to in een even van, ja, imcha, einoch anami, it's ki imcha mekeir chayim, and mekeir chayim is all the Tanugim. Ja, Haraya, mitzad the different madrigas in Eden, what is Tanugim, Gedolim, Vatsumim, aber it's all in an even for tofel for botel. Because the one on the word imcho indicates that even tofel for botel. Amamile, he says, what do I need all that? Yeah, what I need all that for? That's all just how orders be alma, which are boyim day asoga. Why the Alter Rebbe says at the end of Perek Dalet, where he talks about the asoga in Gan Eden, he says, we actually shum Nivra, we bring to Ayin Tainuk, L'shum Nivra, there by Maisha Masik. That's a taina which is lefi erech hanivra, so-called, it's a inyan which comes to the nivra, lefi koichois of who. Amamira, says the Rebbe, it's a whole inyan from Tofel. Kol zer loi chofatzti. All of that, I didn't have any pnimis or rotten in that at all. Ainly chayfetz bezer. Rachli kolel beginnes atzmes ereintay. The whole inyan is to go out to the inyan for the atzmes, to be kol mamishbe, aer shalamayla, mikol, giluyim, and that does. No, the immediate inyan from Pshitas atzmes, how is lamayla mikol, anugim, mikol, giluyim, which can have any reference to hasogya. That's already the beginning of this whole principle. The Alter Rebbe, that you don't need anything to have to start a whole new Gan Eden. Come to say Yid, what he's durking over with them Asogya, with them Gefühl, with them approach to whole even going higher than Asogya. The Gan Eden, that's not something that it's not really it's not really something that can draw him. It's something that he call attractive to him. In other words, he's looking for something incomparably higher. Come over and look at the term, the famous mimer from Seis Tosis, the Sogel Al-Kor in Pasha Tazriya, that the Alter Rebbe says, we state lo yekavodim al-manas l'kabel pras, and he says, oh, even from Gan Eden is even from pras. It's a little prusa, a little piece cut off the loaf. He said, you have to be a shaloy al-manas l'kabel pras, and you only go for atzmas. I mean, it's well known, the famous Alter Rebbe that he made over Divigimat, the whole Indian, and Gan Eden, Kiyadu, the ganze Sipurim Bezer. This is a brief policy statement for them Indian.
The Rav said before that that's a chilus to Louis, and the fact that there was an understanding of the chiyuv. If he didn't feel the mile of Gan Eden before he started this Hispanah, then
well, I'm saying he doesn't feel the mile of Gan Eden. He goes beyond that. He's massive. Was it the mile of Gan Eden? But then he sees that that's only just a horror, like every day meet his heart. Yeah. So I mean, it's not that he doesn't have any hasogya in Gan Eden, that he just completely bypasses it altogether. You have to have a hasogya, but he doesn't see that to be the aim of all of his chukah. His chukah is for them. Going upwards the whole time. Because Sokos the Hasogin Gan Eden is Am Shocha B'toich HaKli. And he said, Kol Zel Oich Hofatzi Raklech, he called it B'chinus Atzmus Ein Say. I mean, it's an amazing principle. So whatever he says.
Imcha is also Tofes Mokom. Also the levels of Imcha is also Tofes Mokom. Not
because it's saying it's imcha.
No, it's tafel and still holds.
Imcha means together with you, as it were. But sometimes the word im, it's brought down. There's still more money what they bring. There's a lesson of a Mishnah that in Homas or somewhere stated in the Mishnah that Yorshei HaBaal Yorshim im Yorshei HaIsha or something like that. So what it means is that the Ikar Yerush is the Baal, his Yerush. But these other ones can also be Yerush if he's not around, if he's not B'chaim or something, Ayin Lo Yerush, then these are also Yerush. I mean, but they're Im Yerush Baal, they're bottle of a Tofel. Still has a lotion in a Mishnah, which indicates clearly the word Im can be used in a form of Tofel or bottle. So it says that that's the union of Im Cho Lo Chofatz. Amira says, say, Indian Akviras, or those are Indian from Ketairas, or that's a Taich, these Kashras, or the Kesher, Shalamayla mi Seichel HaMusahak, Shazal begins Yitzia mi Akli HaMakbil. Like we saw before, the whole even the Koiches Pinim, the Bech HaChitzayin, and the whole Indian of the Chitzaynius, allowed the Tafki to bring everything into a Kli. But to make the Kli a rich Kli, and how do you call it, a Kli with the Seiras, the Dveikis, Bechulu, of all swimmers out Lefi, Keil, Shala, Adam. This is like we said before, this is all taking the Adam in order to make him go up into Kiloi Adam. We state the Lashon of Kiloi Adam, who they're both in the Union of Navakus, in which he is Misasik, and both like Yabi, the Etzem Adam himself, that's into the Azoch Inyanim, which are beyond the Inyanim of Adam. The Inyanim of Lamailami Medida Vagbola, and outside the whole Inyan of Kli Hamakbil, that it's not a Inyan from Hagbola. Even though, and here we see the Peli, even though it starts off with a certain form of Hagbola, Kisokosov, Eza Hasoga Shlotiya is a Hagbola. And even the name from Hasogas Shlila is also a form of Hagbola. But we have to say that Hasoga, its whole purpose is just to lead into the Bilti Gvul. And the Ike is not so much the Hasoga, but they lead into the Bilti Gvul. And then the Nefesh itself, what you might call, turns on, and the Etzem HaNefesh senses Ayin Seif how it is B'Yemes Lamita. So come to us that the Hasoga only leads in to a higher Inyan. That's what's called in many places. It's brought down even in the, I think it's even mentioned in the famous man from Purim Kota, Friedrich Rebbe in Pesach, in the Kibbutz Yehudim. It's a long line of different pillar in some of those races. Pillar the Kinyonim don't stay. He do it in one of the things that's written over there, that the Indian he calls it the Rusa de Liba, he calls it the Rusa de Liba, begins with his bonanas, of a Sofa Sota, and goes up into the pshitas of the Ein Seif, and then all that his bonanas has done is just touch off the iskashus of the Nishama Mitzadatz more in the Ein Seif, Ekshu Shosh Amiti. Well, the whole Seichel is only like a leading ground into Inkompo Bihaya. But he says it has to be that way. Kadesh Kalayanyanim, you Achmium Amitium, like we were masbeh before. And he calls it over there Rusa de Liba. And the word Rusa de Liba got different Pirushim, as the truth is. Because in Tanya he mentions Rusa de Liba maybe 3 times, I think it is. Zayin, he brings Rusa de Liba and Periklametes. He mentioned Rusa de Liba, I think again in Mem Gimel, I would state the Rusa de Liba 3 times altogether. But over there, it's a little bit more mashma that Rusa de Liba can still have a shachas mitzeichel, even though it means the Rotzen Haleiv, but it means the Rotzen Haleiv, the Maila, the Koch of Leiv, the Yisraelis, which is necessary to bring to all the ashpoyas that Leiv can have. He brings that break. It's a sign that Leiv Gam came Chumri, and therefore it's Korev and Kolei Body and V'chulu. In the other places, instances where Rusa de Liba means the Rotzen Atzmi, Gamri Lamaila Me'asoga, Lamaila means called Gidrei Asoga, and it's called Rusa de Liba Mitzad the Rotzen Atzmi. So over there in that mind, I'm almost certain it's in the Kibbutz Yehudim. The Rebbe Masber took this sort of principle of Beloshon Acher, that there has to be the Isboninus first in the Inyonim Shelamayla and the Asogas Ha'orabul V'Agabi, and then there's the move into the Etzem. But the ultimate avoida is Mitzad the Etzem Anishoma, not Mitzad the Asoga. Nimsa the Asoga is only a kli of a Reinfield to go in. It's like a base yard into the Ika. But the Ika is the Ashenkin in Chitzenius Aleh, the Ika, the Ava, which is a Olo from the Asoga, does it the Ika. And here the whole is not that and the Seichel, the connection of the Seichel with that is a Ika. Here the whole the Seichel is only a base yard, again in the Amitius, or Hisoiderus, which is the Etzem HaNishom.
The more you understand the cycle, the more you...
The more you understand what you don't understand. And the more you understand what you don't understand, that touches off the Etzem HaNeshama. That the Etzem HaNeshama gets prompted by that harmless in the Adam, that he's longing for what you might call for the impossible in a way. So the Etzem HaNeshama says, well, it's not impossible, because that's what we really are. We're Yidden and we're Mela, that's what we are. Let's move together, but take Kol Inyan. In other words, the whole Inyan is only to touch off the Aveda of the Etzem. And I say it's much more. That's what he brought the whole mind of Rashbi. Like we said the other week, last week we mentioned. All of a sudden, first line Rashbi, and who can go? Be dumb as that's Rashbi. That's a very fascinating statement. What is this done to ordinary people learning Amshim? We call this Rashbi, B'chant Katira. No, this is Ayin. Well, every year it's got Etzem and Evan. Rashbi was a man, so this mayor given by him, or called him a Chayav. He was only the Etzem and Evan's money. Yeah, that was what he was. Like, it brings in the Perik we're learning now, Tana Perik Koftes, the Tzaddik, he's called Inyonis, man, it with the Nefesh Alakis. So this is it. So Rashbi wasn't just the Yin of a Nefesh Alakis, no, the Nefesh Alakis how it is, in an even from Beyachida of Beila Hitamamik. That's how the Rebbe says it. Call upon him. What is shy to everybody is Yin from Kitoiras. Well, that's our Kashus, for Maila Miseichel Amusik, Shazeh Bechin Shitzia Mia Klia Magio. And that's the Heifer Ha'ava, Mea is bonus to Chayecha. Shazeu Ishashvus Oir Bekli. Or that's Dafkia, you read it from the Oir into the Kli. When I say you read the Shefa, which is Nimsha, from the Moichin and the Yisraelis, the Midas, are in the Kalim. This is in the Moyach, and later that's in the Leiv, and they always have a Kesher and Ashpur, one of the other. Over here, the whole Indian of the Asog is only to lead up into the Etzem, and he said, therefore, that's the Indian of Ketuidas, but that's Kesher, and Kesher means here, Aval is Kasher. The Ketuidas, Ubchinas Aktiro, Ayin, which is brought down in that version of Rashbi, Hainu Kesher Shel Kayoma, Shel Amayla Miaseicho, Avezu Eina Choy Lefes Ve'oi Veres. That this particular Ava never, had he called, alters or blows away, as you might say. Cholefes, it sort of gets lost after the union from Tefillah V'Ka'itza. Now, here's a very periodic Nakuda, but there are more or less Messiah, the whole beer with this Nakuda. He said, Kasher, you've already been oiler from that is boninus into the Aveda Mitzati Etzem. Then he said, the union from Ketira means, and it's much more that he's touching that in the Aramic, that the union from Ketira, there's something in that Aramic statement there, Chad Ketira, that's indicative of a Kesher Shel Kayoma. It's like maybe we discussed together that the whole Indian, the Aliyah of the Sefasa Aramis, but that's the Aliyah on the Sutta. I saw a perfect example. It's time to be going past. And that gives a tremendous idul to our whole, we're talking about the Shidurim for Noyat Shmim for the whole Indian program. The Yeshiva, the Rebbe says in a couple of places in Gimel and in the Dalet, Gimel and Dalet, the Rebbe brings about the Maila of what Moshe Rabbeinu was Metagim, and he was Matik the Torah, we call Shivim Loshem, but the whole Shivim Moshe Nation. And the Rebbe brings up that, he says that that's the beetle of the whole curse of the Dura flogging, that Ishmas Riyehu, but in Piru, that they were all Rosh Nakoidish, scholars, but if Hayichud, and this is the April for them, he said, Adidei, what you learn Torah in their Lashonas, you bring them back the whole Yichud, you bring them back, and you makasha them back into the Inic, as well as the Lashon, it's like a inequality of that people, as if you learn. Like he brings that the Baal Shem Tov used to say words in Polish and in other languages, Davki. It was Davki Ayin by him to do that in order to be mal madbik or those inyonim beteicha kedusha. What they say, you mal the whole shurish of that umma. Ich weiß noch so. Pili plastic inyonim. So the Rebbe said that's the beetle of the whole Indian, the Dura Floge, the Amshoches Ayira Alidei Sheroim Diptera Bisfoso. And the Rebbe brings down in Chelik Tavli, he mentions more Bariches, that he says over there, the Dafki, Kol HaGevoya Yeser, Yered Lamata Yeser, He said, when you learn Torah in a sofa from the Sfas Amim, well, that's Mamshik, a higher koyach in Torah, and that gives a shefa, how do you call it, omuk, yesem, mitzad the etzem learning, mitzad the etzem hashpoah, the Torah, that's gives a deeper shefa. Then what you learn in a sofa from the human. So just imagine, we sit once a week, we learn one of the highest things that ever hit the world, the Ayin Beis, and we learn it in Sofa Anglia. So what, I think it's an amazing idu. We just learned like basic English, that's geweldig point geleid. And read of Yiddish, or read of Oskoidisch, or stuff. Yeah, we see that the Rebbe says that's got a mile atzuma. As he brings it on. He said that Tafka a mile. As he but certain other Gedolim saw one of the Taina that you're allowed to learn Torah only either be Yiddish or be Sofa HaKoidesh, you have a Torah learn and andere Sprachen, it's good for the Torah, we see the Rebbe had called Mamish verkehrt. Aber nicht stand, the Rebbe didn't agree with that. Had called Mamish Hafuk Mizeh. We see that the Rebbe's shitty is that that's Tafka, the Koyach HaKi Elyoy. At the day what you bring out, the Indian from Torah into these sofas, the L'sheina So'amim, that's a biro omach haviyesa in the whole Indian from the world and the whole Indian from the Yuma So'ilam and the ganze do it. He said, and therefore it's a beginning to teach them the Sheva Mitzvahs, but now Davki B'Sfosam, Davki in their language. With the ganze Indian, that's Asher them mamish into the. Then he goes even further. They would Yidden themselves learn Indian in Torah b'safashelahem, even though they're not learning that, or Yidden learn it in their lashon. Well, that's poel behema. I'm shocked with mevatel all the dvarim abilti rutzuyim. But get to pirud almost on the day the aflogo and nachas of in piriplas. It's mamish heipach hamistaber on the day roy v'oilam when there's musta keilan and Torah in English, but geheißen das doch mit who says, what says. Well, I've heard it in Shem and Gedolis, they were by no means write-offs, they were big people. And then we see that the Rebbe is all Mahalach is cool, Pilidike, Andrstike, Gisha. The Rebbe sees pink verkehrt in them. That's one of the big changes the Friedrich Rebbe made in the whole Lubavitch. Yeah, when he came to America, the Friedrich Rebbe started to tell that they should translate certain inyonim and give them over all kaponim. But he wrote certain things, which he wanted that they should be given out in English, even though he didn't. He wanted that people should give them out. So far, Anglia stuff. We should start this whole union of certain inyonim in Pnimis HaTorah coming out in the Safasa Medina. That's 100. There was a big ufta for the Friedrich.
That's for the Bureau. It's very mashma that when Chabadikim were in Shanghai, they put out things in Chinese. That's
could well be.
When I learned. I read something that mashma that put out in
if you see what the Rebbe says in these secrets, you'll just go out and speaking in it. It was to hold in pink color. That was the biggest possible thing to catch. I say state taught. And not only that, the Rebbe brings down taught in a Ha'orah. It's very interesting. The Rebbe brings down in a Ha'orah from the Hakdom, the unbelievable computerized Gionis. Even though he never used a computer in his life. That the Rebbe brings down there from a Hakdoma to the Sefer Choyves Halavovis. That's from the Rabbeinu B'chai Sheni or Isnech like that. Two Rabbeinu B'chai. Bringt that out. The Rebbe is in the Hakdoma to this. What is the Hakdoma? The Hakdoma was the thing that was written by the translator, because the Rabbeinu B'chai wrote it in Arabic. And all Choyves Halavovis is a Tirgum. It's one of the Choyves Halavovis is a Tirgum. So the Matargim writes that there's 3 inyonim in a Tirgum. That there's you have to know first of all Lashon Kodesh very well. Then you have to know you have to be able to be matik into the other Lashon, and that has to be B'tachas HaDiyuk. And you also have to know the Indian B'tachas HaDiyuk. And you have to be able to use Yeah, that in mamshit that in Lashon Kodesh, and then we mamshit that over into the so Rabbi writes a whole thing, or the Rabbi writes a cheshbon that the Yedias Asofer, this is the union from Yehuda Tatoa. This Yehuda Chayzit Lashon Kodesh. Yedias Ayin, and this Yehudi Loa. Yedias Ayin, I mean, all we have to be mamshit Yehudi Loa into Yehuda Tatoa, sof kosof mamish into the Elam Apir. That's the Umas of Elam. You have to know the language. And he calls it Ulai Zeh Yeshu Amiti v'Yeshu Nivra v'Yeshu Nivra Od Yerid. I'm telling you, it's mamish mind-blowing. I saw it a couple of weeks ago. I had to look up something also, and I came up on the singing about, I remember the Rebbe told me that we should talk Dafka English. The Rebbe said that it's so late enough English. And teaching the Chevra in English, and told me. And the Rebbe was very chatchil about it. I thought, I'm a serious nervous with the Baritz, and so late enough English. But if you look in these sikhs, it's a big fakir. It's
an union of Birurim.
Yeah.
Now the Rebbe said we finished the...
Yeah, but here the Rebbe says more than Birurim. Here the Rebbe said there's a mamish, the beetle, the whole union from the Deraf. It's the Amshochas HaYichud, would take the...
I think the Rebbe says last level where everyone's going to speak Lashon HaKodesh.
Yeah, so was
So maybe...
That's all Inyan Acher. Here the Rebbe talks about the usage of Torah in a Zam Minoifen, so a very, very high Madrega, and it's part of the Gilui Elikus in the Elam, which ain't a Chanami. It leads to the Gilui from Leosim. But so much in from Biro, it's in from Gilui Elikus, but Mokim Apiro. Pera. Oh, so Pera. And he makes it three madrigas, the Yesha Miti and the Sofa, the Sananda, and then eventually it got through the Tirugum, Gate to Sarim, but Mamish, Oilam Apiru, this Mamish, the uniform, the Chudi Lord, Mamish, I saw that in Hayora, my Mamish, my eyes just jumped out. And to go find in the middle of this, translator's introduction to the famous Alavovit, or these three in honor to make them into that's nicht Teva, nicht beterach HaTeva. Das ist das Melech HaMashiach being nilcham at the Metzias Olam. Like the other night, somebody said to me, why aren't you allowed to take mashke? Why is it not good to get shike? I said, because Melech HaMashiach was nilcham naked that. Melech HaMashiach said, you're not allowed to take any more than 3 glasses. Yeah, what do you want to? Ja, dat is hetzelfde. Maar dan zit niet geweld, maar zo stam schikkeren. Wat zou er wachten? En mijn maaskje zo, we gaan je. Ja, het is even simpel, het is gabber zo. Maar we stam schikkeren zo. Gewoon. Maar meer, that's what I answered somebody who asked me the other night. Maar meer, we have to know that all these does it the Milchama from Melech HaMashiach. You can see it. I thought to myself, lies. That's what the Rebbe says about these even from the Rishonim. I knew that the Rebbe had gehalten from Be'er Moshe HaTorah so it, Hertig, I am Mishen Rashi bringt das doch. I knew the Rebbe, aber da steht das auch. Hat das, ich hab die Chavtips ein anderer Wort. We see das Melech HaMashiach was Mamish bringing these in Yonim, B'toich Piru Lo'elam.
Rebbe himself was...
Pilipla, Mamish, Adov, a Niflish ain't come up. Amma. That's what the Rebbe says here. That the union from Keturas, maybe why he calls it here Ketira, because that's the Aliyah, that's one of those fast Arami is Shaykh herself upon him to Lashon Kodesh. Shaykh to Lashon Kodesh. Or it's a union from Michut, or that's the Aliyah and the Dveik is in Lashon HaKodesh, or that's the union from a Kesher, Ulai Biglaus is a Yerat Lamata, Beteich Arami. So that's a simon that the Sherish Mimeno is go Hoich, and therefore there because of a Kesher Shal Kayoma. Now that's a period that he said that this Arava ain't a Chalev is Voiveres, it's not Mishtane. So it's moving. Yesh was and I must admit, unfortunately I had two surgeries on Sunday, and it's hard for me to talk because I'm still very sore from the whole thing. So I can't be married now. Oh, but that what he writes about this hour, Bli Neder, Be'ez Hashem, and the coming year will be Maktish a bit more of Tzumas Lev there. But he says that the hour is Einach Chaleves Voiveres. It doesn't pass over. It doesn't go away. Yesh Laharik was exactly into what Gedorim does that fit. I mean, we can say that's in from Riusa Deliba, that's a Rotzen Atzmi. So it's more the in from Avo, how it's Ovo, the in from Rotzen, it's in from Rotzen Amiti, or maybe it's connected with what he brings out, Pasha V'Yechi and Torah, the in from Avo Rabo. You know, that's also a very interesting, because a big pilpul, he calls it the Avo Rabo, and Tani calls it Avo, but Tanurim, Arrogance, pilpul, of a so-called. Where the Kashas and the Rotzen in Elikus, which we call Ava, is not mitzad agoyrim anymore, but it was only a goyrim to get to the etzem, and it's mitzad the etzem, then it's not shy that it should go. In other words, you don't lose azar Ava. So even though you may not feel it, a tzaddik feels the ganze Zeit, or you may not feel it, but it's like working under the, how do you call it, under the surface. It would never let you move away from it. In other words, once that Av is there, then you can't really ever lose the effect of that Av. It may not be the whole clock of the Av, but the effect of it is there. In other words, it's always that we're holding you. It's like so saying, wait a minute. It's the sort of azhora pneumius of that Av, b'chol regava. Once it's been Misayra, then you never really lose the effect of it. You have it. That's why you're kanui al yedei avazu. But yesh laharik, we'll maybe talk about it a little more. Nimta, every bein korbanos liktoiras, the korbanos who avida the b'chinas pnimi, the nefesh. Yeah, ktoiras who avida b'chinas makif the nefesh. In other words, makif meaning the in and of the etzem mamish. Yeah. Mamila, that's the word ktiro. It's a unifinish kashrus. Yeah, but a kesher shel kayoma. So we have to say that a kesher shel kayoma is not really an ordinary type of kesher, because most kshurim can be ochaponim, they can be undone. When we say it's a kesher shel kayoma or eno cholefes v'eno iveres, then that indicates that really the two things belong together. They're really like one union, and therefore it's a katira, it's not stamakesh. It's his kashas atzmiyas. So we'll leave it up to your good taste and your good efforts to read the Kitzur, because I can't anymore. This whole thing is getting a little bit uncomfortable again. So it's funny when you talk, it starts jumping on again. Yeah, amen. For years I never went to Rabbanish, but I would say, totes. And my mother is, so what do we see from that? That Geteros is good of Zahir Chazak. So let's get cracking, guys. It's the whole Indian from the Yisraelis to the Gula of Booty Sofi. It's my dry Kisu. Das ist nicht auf die Tafetas. I remember the Ketira in Melech HaMashiach Atzmi, in the Osiyah Deur, Shema Eres Karin. It also has to be an Aiv, Leich Chofer, Leich Veres, has to be in Azar Aiv. It was mehr verstehen what the Rebbe will, and oh yes, now we understood what the Rebbe wanted, oh yes, it has to be an Aiv from Ketira. Darkibuch is we don't understand, but we wissen, hat der Rebbe gesagt, dass er jeder so never. Da sagen wir, wir nehmen im Prinzip zu Levova, ki atzumim mitzad dekeshe atzma. Shrabenu touches out that keshe kemuva in Torah, Baruch, Pasha Mishpatim. Also then Pasha Mishit. So no, that's it.
What about pro and con? You bring it?
Kind of everything. I already mentioned
bring in code.
I already mentioned I was very careful to mention free code. You have to forgive me. I'm just going through a very difficult time at the moment. It's hard for me to, outside what I give to my children in my life in the yeshiva, it's hard for me to take on. I don't know that. Really. Also, Claudia is very so I do the best I can within what I can give. So, but I don't know, maybe I should imagine what for right now. When is it cut tomorrow? Could be some sort of it's a big day for cut. Good. Okay, guys.
So, I've got a question. Concerning the Birur of Aramit, being that the Torah only invented the Shara Lashonis after Dur HaPalaga, where does, and the Torah was, Hashem led the Torah to invent the world, where did he get the words like Anochi, Torah, before they were invented? How did they fit into the Torah?
Yeah, in other words, the word Anochi is like the Rebbe says it's like I think the Rebbe says it's a Greek.
Mitzri.
Mitzri, I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, all those words include
Mitzri.
Where they come from if it hasn't been invented.
So, we just have to say very much Bekitzer. Since the whole Indian from Torah was given the matter, Davki to be Miyached, the Tarteni, Verlioinen. It's sort of a feed this section from the Rebbe. That's a Indian Ikri in Torah, that it has to be Moishech, the Sophies, the humors into Torah. Because the Sofa is like a Indian clothing, but it's more and that's it. When they spoke about it being a Rosh Mitzvah, Purim is also the word Purim is a Rosh Paz. The Pur is a Rosh Paz. So the Rebbe spoke the whole thing that the Indian from the Sofa of a Numa is a Indian Ikri. That's a whole way that they give themselves around. It's the Sprach. So that was the Indian from Vayer, Ravayal, Han Sinai, the Yerida, Lamata Mata, to be mile the Tartinim into the early. Well, that has to be Moishech also, Nitzutzes of the Sophies. And that's the Indian of Russian Kodesh. And Aramis. Aramis is like, Indian which is shot to the snake. And then we find that Aramis is very early. It's like a sprach on its own. But it's a Indian which has been brought into the world. Dafki Matumi Etzim Gula Kedusha. Through tremendous killer the Atzmi, these in Nimshach. It's like a Nabu pulling in all the Netzutzes. And that's a chelik from the Bira Hataktin there. And the day Matan Tur. Remember, that fits in well here. At the end of the Torah, the Din Atzmi, that was Moshe Petecha and the Din of the Yara. Okay. Good. Okay, guys. לפי דעת מיימר, קוראים קיבל היהודים. After this, Kabbalah says,
Process the more.